Hello and welcome to Right Hearted with me, Stuart Wakefield. I am delighted to have as my first guest Ms. Jazz Ampaw-Farr. Jazz, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. So I'm a number of things. Resilience Ninja is what's on my business card because that's the truth. But I studied drama and teaching, both my really strong passions. I became I was going for an actress and I was just never that good, to be honest. So I got a few auditions and got into things, but teaching is really where I followed my dream. I've also been involved in kind of lots of different avenues of creativity, but currently I am a speaker and an author, and my pre-pandemic life was traveling the world. My post-pandemic life is writing and doing virtual keynotes.
That's great. And how did you come to be writing?
It's that thing where it's like writing chooses you. I love words, right? My big thing is meeting people where they are. Connection is a huge driver for me. It's that's my why. It's my purpose. It's about connection. And so expression and communication and enrollment is a huge part of that. So writing was always something I did. But I never said I was a writer because I write how I talk. So that kind of gave me the out for, like if you could play the guitar a bit and there's a guitar and you say to someone, I play the guitar, and then they expect you to be Brian Ferry and actually you can just do Farrah Jacques. It's that sort of thing. So I always sort of said, no, I'm not a writer. I just write what I think. And then after I did my TED Talk or before I did my TED Talk, I did a kind of a keynote somewhere and it resonated and it went a bit viral. I was trending on Twitter and I was approached by a publisher saying, we want you to write a book. I thought I was being punked. So I said, well, let's meet for a chat at Westfield, because then if it's a joke, I can just go shopping. And I still went shopping, and he said, yeah, you've got a unique voice and we want to capture that. What do you want to write about? And it was too much freedom for me. What do I want to write about? So I said, well, resilience. I said, great, let's do it. And I got a publishing deal, which meant I had to then say I was a writer and be a writer. And that was the hardest thing. I was the last one to realize that I was a writer.
So did you feel that what you wrote was a passion project, or did you feel like you were kind of writing to market?
God, that's a good question. Is there a difference? I mean, I don't know where everyone else comes from, but for me, it's kind of like one of my favorite drag queens is called Jasmine Masters, and her catchphrase is, my name is Jasmine Masters and I have something to say. And I feel like we are all Jasmine Masters. We all have something to say, but what stops us, that kind of like vulnerability vulture that sits on your shoulder, that digs her claws in and says, you're not good enough, shut up, you don't do it. But we all have a story. That we all have 4 stories. We have the story we tell others about ourselves. We have the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves, and they're sometimes very different. There's the story other people tell about us, and there's the unknown story, the story that you don't know and no one else knows, but it's in there. And I think we're all communicators, we're all writers, but when it comes to, is it passion or was it writing for an audience? For me, it's always about connection. So it was always about audience, and that was a problem because what I wanted to say, the story I wanted to tell about me and the story I told about me were 2 different stories. So I had to make a decision whether I was going to marry the passion to the audience and be vulnerable and be, scared, or whether I was going to stay and protect myself and just leave my heart here and right here. It was tricky.
Yeah. So you writing nonfiction and obviously sharing the experiences that you've had, and I will link to your TEDx talk because it's a very, very powerful 18 minutes. But how did you sort of come over those barriers where you feel like you're kind of taking that step and really becoming vulnerable?
Oh, yeah, huge question. Well, it's interesting because one thing I learned through the talk I did before the TEDx, so I was a keynote speaker. I was traveling around talking about mainly literacy, really, and writing and, stuff I knew. And I went to a talk I went to a conference and I was supposed to be giving a talk, and I was sitting there thinking, I wonder what would happen if I just told the truth, which was insane because I have spent years crafting a persona that makes me feel like I'm acceptable rather than an imposter, right? So I've this professional, persona, like I wanted to be a leader in education, and all the leaders I saw were like white guys, and I'm brown and female, and it's never, I can't blend with this hair and this bum. So I crafted this, like if I could just convince people I was acceptable. So I just turned the volume down on who I was, and that became what I did. That was a habit. And then, so I was standing there in this sort of thing, I wonder if I just told the truth. And I actually went up and asked if I could change my presentation, the slides I'd given him. And the guy said, yeah. And I just spoke from the heart. I just told the truth. I just said, and I was talking to educators who are my particular favourite people. And I said, look, I know you're all exhausted and you all want extra, how do I help my kids do better in GCSEs? But I've got to tell you that what you do is more than a spreadsheet. It's more than data. It's more than exam results. And actually what you do is change lives. And I should be dead and I'm not. And it's because of you. And that, I kind of thought I'd do it and I'd go, but that willingness to be vulnerable resonated, and actually was the very thing I was trying to hide was the very thing that gave people agency.
Right.
And so suddenly people were drawn into this connection with their why, a reconnection with their purpose, and wanting to kind of explore it more. So I was kind of along for the ride because I'm very clear that what I want to do, I want the world changed, and I can't do it on my own. I want people to meet each other where they are because I am a beneficiary of that. And I see what happens when that doesn't happen. So that driving force means that I will put myself in a position that is uncomfortable. I will put myself in a position where I'm like, I don't know if anyone has done this before. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going, who's with me? Right. That's because the drive takes you there. But never do I feel comfortable or confident. Well, no, comfortable. I've got to that because I'm comfortable with failing. But never is it confidence that does that.
Okay. So I'm thinking for somebody who's, fiction writing, they're making this world, they've got their characters, they're kind of in love with them, they're writing their novel, and they start to get to that point where, you become so very self-critical. And you said earlier about, writers tell stories, but there are also the stories we tell ourselves. And they are, I'm not good enough. Somebody's probably already told this story better than me. Yeah. I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to get terrible reviews. I'm going to get terrible sales. And then some of those things actually do happen. So are there any sort of, in your experience, any ways that writers can kind of reframe their thinking to help them through those moments?
Yes. Let's take them one at a time because I've got loads for everyone. So this whole thing about I'm not good enough. First of all, if you thought you were the only person that thought that, like if you were the only person that felt that, you would be in a lab somewhere and the government would be experimenting on your brain because that is the inner cry of every soul. It is the human condition. I'm not good enough. Like when someone says to you, I like your top, and you go, oh, it's only Primark. We can't even acknowledge the clothes we're wearing suit us because we have this. It's true. This is my battle cry. Oh no, this whole thing, because we're constantly deflecting and pushing things away. And what happens then, because we spend a lot of time doing the day, in the moment, in what we have to do now, and the rest of our time we invest in worrying about things that haven't happened yet. So what we don't do is lift our head up and look back. That's the key thing. When you look back, even looking back at, the pandemic year, when you look back at where you were and where you are now, what you've achieved, how you've survived, not just survived, how you've thrived, not just thrived, how you've actually felt alive, how you've driven change, how you've been a driver of change. Those little wins, it's really important that you mark them and stand them. I have a jar called The Truth About You. And when people say something to me, when I get a compliment, I practice smiling, maintaining eye contact and saying, thank you.
Really?
And it's literally that hard sometimes because I want to go, no, my hair is not nice. I'm a terrible writer. but I practice because that jar is a list of little wins, little successes, and it's like failure. It's like rungs on a ladder. Every time you acknowledge and recognize that, you get to stand on that and climb a bit higher, and success is at the top. So it's a practice. It's not like, you're not you don't have imposter syndrome, or you do. It's a practice, and the idea isn't to get rid of imposter syndrome, because if you did, you'd be Donald Trump. He was totally authentic. People always he was totally authentic, but zero vulnerability, zero. So he couldn't even say the word weakness without spitting it out. That's what real authentic being, a way of being, looks like, with no vulnerability. And so imposter syndrome, the idea isn't to take it down so that you've got I'm the best at everything and I think I'm great. The idea is to take it down from an impenetrable metal wall to a white picket fence. So you can notice it, see it, recognize it, and go, I recognize that, and then step over it.
I think you've really hit on something there, because I always say to the writers that I speak to, is that you need to be self-critical to be able to kind of objectively look at your work and say, okay, this is what isn't working. This is how I can fix this. But when that becomes too much, that's when it starts to push you down, and you have this "I'm not good enough" feeling.
Well, the interesting thing is, whenever you're creating something, whether it's a book, whether you're writing a play, whatever, there's only two questions you need to consider: who's it for and what's it for. And if who it's for is for yourself, then you can never not be good enough. I mean, it's just, if you want to write something and then criticize yourself, just go and take a tube ride. That's miserable. Do that instead. It's less time. But if who is it for? If it's not for you, you are not your audience. So I did a bit of wedding photography. I was a photographer, and I was too expensive for myself, like for friends, because I was not aiming. Like when I got married, I paid £600 and had some old guy who took, all the white people, all the black people, separated photos, and it was terrible. My wedding album was terrible. But so I was charging a lot more. And what I really was clear about is that people like me were not my audience. They were not my clients. I knew who I was writing for, who I was creating for, who I was photographing. Knowing who you are delivering for is really important, because you don't get to you're not the best judge of whether it's good enough or not, because it's not for you. It's for someone else. So getting clear on who it's for is important, and tying that in with that feeling of I'm not good enough. Here's the thing. Good enough for what, by the way? Where's the enough? Who is this person who is measuring people's worth? Where is that? Well, I've never met them. And also we tie self-worth to achievement. That's where I'm not good enough comes from. We tie in what we do with how good we are. And for me, I don't have a to-do list. I realise you're going to die with an unfinished one. So that's a fool's game. I'm not doing that anymore. I have a to-be list. Okay. And on that to-be list, I write, how do I want to feel? And I don't write bitter, twisted, angry, hateful, obviously. So it's about getting, for me, it's about getting it in alignment, because that your brain's a liar, and that voice of I'm not good enough will constantly be there. So you can ignore it, you can take heart from it, or you can recognize it and go, yeah, that's a real feeling, but this is who it's for, and this is what it's for. So let's go ask them. Okay. Because then it doesn't, if you get in your head, you're finished. Yes. So it's about connecting, because writing is a gift for me. It's a gift for others when you're writing a book. Okay.
So thinking about others, we've written our book, we send it to some beta readers, they come back with comments, and I'll give you an example. So my last book, sent it to a beta reader, she came back and she said, I don't like your main character. The whole book is focused on that side of that relationship and that main character, and straight out the bat, she's like, I don't like him. And I tried to write him sort of feisty, and she just saw somebody angry. So my first feedback is, I'm terrible. I can't even write a person who's like me. And, you start to get into all of that. Yeah, so again, we've talked about, who you're writing for. I thought I was writing for that person, and she's come back and said, I don't even like your character.
So do you remember Family Fortunes?
Yes.
Remember that show? They ask 100 people, all right, and then they come back with the most popular answers, put them on the board, and like 60 people says this. You could ask 100 people who are you are writing for, and 40 of them will dislike, the pearls that the secondary character wore in the second chapter. 3 of them will hate the fact that it's set on a beach because they want to go skiing.
Right.
There's a difference between like writing for someone and pleasing everybody in something, because that, as much as is whose it's for, there's also who it's not for. Now, if someone doesn't like your main character, if everyone comes back and says, I hate your main character, 1, you're onto something. And 2, that's feedback worth paying attention to.
Yes.
But it really is a numbers game. And like, I remember when I read Body of Water the first time, and I was uncomfortable that it was the setting. It was dark and it was moody and there was waves and there was rocks. Because for me, I want to be on a beach in the sun. Like, I just like light and sun. But the story, I finished that book and wanted to be like in Scotland on the cliffs. And that is not a place I ever want to be. I don't want to be there. If I'm going to go anywhere, it's going to be a beach and it's going to be hot. But because I was so wrapped up in the characters and the story and the journey and do you know what I mean? So it's not so much if I only write what you like, I'm never writing from my heart. But if I write something that everyone hates, and I don't know, can you write something that everybody hates? I mean, people are weird. There's someone to like everything you do, isn't there? I mean, I don't know that you can, and I know it's mad because I do it as well, but judging it on one person's reaction or a small number of people's reaction, or, someone who you thought would get its reaction. My advice is have the conversation where you say, oh my God, I'm awful. And then the rational you says, well, it's just one person. And then the emotional you says, but it's terrible. I wanted them to like it and they don't like it. So I've got to stop writing forever. And the rational you says, that's one option. Or here's another one. And it's just that there are two voices. There's more than one side to the story. But when you get feedback, it comes back. The thing is, congratulate yourself on being brave. Because you put it out there. I mean, most people wouldn't do it because they're scared of what if I'm not good enough. Well, I can help you with that. What if I fail? There's no if. You're going to fail. Of course you are. What do you want to be the only human on the planet that doesn't fail? You're going to fail. But you're better investing your energy in when this manuscript comes back and I have negative comments. What is my strategy going to be? You're better directing your energy in how are you going to navigate that perceived failure to use that as a failure rung on your ladder that takes you to success, because failure is not an if, it's a when.
So talking about I might come back to that about when. So my last book, Behind the Seams, came out last July, and a writer friend of mine, and I self-published, and a writer friend of mine said, oh, who's actually, just to put it in this context, she is trying to get an agent. So she's sending her manuscript out.
Right.
And she said to me, you're so brave for self-publishing. I could never do that. And my first reaction was, I think you're brave for going out to a traditional publisher because I don't want to be turned down. I don't want an agent to say, this isn't good enough. And then a publisher to say, this isn't good enough. So our attitudes to what is brave are very different.
It's true. And also, like, if you look at children's fiction, right, if you go into a bookshop, and I've done this with my kids' books, if you go into a bookshop, in Waterstones where they have like a table and it's like popular children's fiction, and you look at what's there, hardly any of those characters are brown, right? Most of the books have a boy as the main character. Yeah. Most of them have some sort of storyline where there's adversity, but it's not too bad, and eventually we get through, and the adults aren't usually that good. There's a real, so if David Walliams pens a book for kids tomorrow, it's going on that table, right? There are so many authors who write where their main character is brown or the story is set somewhere else, and if it doesn't fit the current mold of what sells, because it's a business, then it's not going to end up on that table. But what that means, it's like saying there are no writers, there are no books. Like I looked at all my kids' books. I have a library because I used to teach in primary, and I've got 3 kids. And I mean, I have a library. My son's got books on every wall, bookshelves. There's hundreds. And I went through all of them to find who's got like a brown person on the cover. And I had 7 books out of, I think it was about 560, 7 books. And 4 of those were bears. So, when you say, oh, we get turned down or it's not good enough, remember that it's not a judgment on you personally. It's a judgment on what is working right now. Where do we go right now? If I'm an agent, right, I came into this job to take a chance and find an undiscovered genius, but I don't get paid unless I find someone who's marketable. And do you know what I mean? So there's so much more at play. So judging the creative value of something against someone who has a job and it's part of a commercial machine, it doesn't make sense. It's like asking my 5-year-old to make Sunday dinner. I mean, he knows where the fish fingers are, but he's not going to be able to. Do you know what I mean?
I hope you're not dissing fish fingers for Sunday. But anyway.
I had them last night. Fish finger sandwich, mate. It's the food of champions.
Yeah. And I think it's possible for creative people to kind of lose that perspective. And, we talked about who you're writing for. For somebody who is writing for themselves and they decide that they want to, pursue a traditional publishing, I see people getting knocked back. And what I try to say to them is, the agent is going to ask you to make changes to your book. So a publisher will be interested, and the publisher will ask you to make changes to your book. So the public is interested. And I think that mind shift from this is a passion project to this is something marketable that needs to sell. I find that shift really, really interesting. Personally, I'm still not there.
Yeah, and that it's frustrating for us because what you feel is your passion actually made a mark on my life, and we are very different people. So what you feel is I'm writing for me, and what it became, what it grew into, the story it became from me, because I'm looking at it through my lens, which is different to your lens. I never would have had if you hadn't have done that. So I'm always going to encourage people to publish in whichever way to get it out there, because your story is so many other people's story, but they've not got to the point where they can talk about it or ask questions about it, and they may never. And your book, your story might be the one thing that gives someone that element of agency. So actually it's really selfish not sharing it. But also it's a bit like having a baby. When you have a baby, you go to all these classes right beforehand, especially when it's your first one, you get all excited having a baby and you talk about it and you talk through different things. It's a lot of stuff, right? And then the moment when I did this, the moment I had my baby, literally, I had Trinity at home, and I remember the midwives were like packing up, and I literally said, "So what happens now? Do you take her with you to the hospital, or?" And the midwife went, "No, she's yours. She stays with you." And I said, "But what do I do with her?" And she said, "Feed her, hug her. I mean, this is it, Jazz. This is it." And I spent so much time in the creation, the prep, and the that when it happened, I literally hadn't given a thought to what I was going to do with this. Me as a mum, I hadn't envisaged that. So, and obviously, when you have a baby, there's not much choice. You can't go, "Yeah, I've changed my mind." You just get on with it. So I had to. My identity changed. My new identity became Trinity's mum and a woman with a baby. And I built something around that. It's a bit like that with the book. You literally, it's like a baby. I mean, you literally work hard, give birth, prep, do it all, and then you give it to someone and somebody says, "Your baby is fat and ugly and looks like a football." And yes, of course you want to go in. No one ever said that, by the way. Trinity is beautiful. But of course you want to go and lock yourself away, because you just like, this thing just came out of you and somebody's telling you that it is absolutely hideous. Of course you want to lock yourself in a room.
It is, the struggle is real. I mean, I could probably quote you word for word my 1-star reviews. My 5-star reviews, which thankfully there are more of, I probably couldn't even quote a sentence.
But that you're doing yourself a disservice. You're undermining your own influence, because your 1-star reviews are like Velcro. They stick to your brain. Whereas the 5-star reviews could be Velcro, but we dismiss them because our inner voice, when someone says something good, we go back to, oh no, it's only Primark, or don't do this. This sounds so true, but you know, when I said at the beginning, I look in the mirror, I used to practice looking in the mirror and saying to people, thank you, and saying to myself, thank you. Because if you don't craft a way, this is what I mean about worrying about if you fail, but not future-proofing yourself against future writing. If you don't have a way of being able to notice and describe without adding any judgment to your reviews, they are going to own you. Yeah. And what the world loses is your words in our lives. So just be aware that this isn't a self-indulgent, oh, I'm not good enough, so I'm not going to write. You're actually stealing the opportunity for people to grow. Yes. Because you're not sharing. I mean, and for me, when I put it in that, it's attaching what you do to why you're doing it. Like everything on your to-do list has to be attached to something on your to-be list. Because if it's just, I've got to write, it's not very, oh no, you're very disciplined, but I always envy that about you. I can't just, I struggle to just sit down and do something because all the voices of how terrible I am come into it. But I'm going to write because when I do, this is what could potentially happen. People could read that and feel differently. That's a no-brainer for me.
And that's interesting. And I think I'll use that message because I meet a lot of what we call one-day novelists. Right. And they ask what you do. And I say, I'm a writer. The next question is, what is it you write? And I say, romance, novels, whatever. And they all say, one day I'd like to write a novel. And I normally look at them and say, have you tried National Novel Writing Month? Because you write a novel in 1 month. And they look terrified. Yeah. And it's like, nobody needs to see it. It's just, if you want to say one day I'd like to write a novel, write it. No one's waiting for it. Mm. You can take as long as you want, and then it's done. But I wonder what stops those people. I don't know if they're just making excuses. I haven't got time. I need to do this. I have to do X, Y, and Z before I can sit down at a table.
Well, it's identity is a choice. I'm a writer. Belonging requires agreement from the people you say you belong to. So if I say I'm a writer, and then the National Writers Guild say, "Oh no, girl, you are not describing yourself," so then I can identify as it if I like, but the lack of belonging will always be something that will hover over me. So when people say one day I'd like to write a book, what they're actually saying is, I am not a writer. That sounds fantastic. I feel like I have a story in me, but as up to this moment, I have not yet been brave enough to even consider putting that down. But the truth of what I want to write and who I am keeps coming out. It's like these flashes of like, oh my gosh, one day I'll write a book. One day I have this, but I'm not brave enough. And I think, that's really important because the moment we put it on, I don't have time. My job doesn't allow for it. I'm going to be rubbish anyway. All this external loci of control, we're actually eroding our own creativity, our own ability to be fulfilled. And also we set these upper limits of success around identity. Like you only achieve what you believe you deserve. So we're telling ourselves we're not good enough. And for every time you say that, there's got to be a counter. I say I'm not good enough, or should I say, up until now, I haven't been good enough for this, but from now on, I will. Because every time you say it, it's another brick in the wall of closing down the creativity. So that upper limit is, I could only ever achieve this. You get this a lot. People describe themselves as, I'm just they put the limiter just before what they do so that they can belittle themselves, either so you don't do it first or because they don't want to imagine that they could be anything more. And so that idea, it's not, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too fat, I'm too thin, it's raining. I'm not brave enough. That's the story. And a lot of things come back down to letting fear drive your bus, letting fear be in control of your decision making and it's not a bad thing, it just is. But owning it means that when you're ready to write that book, when that one day comes, when you sit down, the transition between not being a writer and being a writer will be easier, smoother, and more fulfilling, and will become a way of being because you didn't lie to yourself all those years. It sounds a bit harsh.
No,
it sounds a bit harsh.
I think it's powerful stuff. And I did have a bit of a, I wouldn't say an argument. I was running a writer's retreat, and there was a writer there, and she'd written a big chunk of her novel, but then she kept interrupting me,
And I was talking about, I get up at 6:30 in the morning, I write for 4 hours, then I have the rest of my day. And she sort of waved me away, and she's like, "Oh, I can't do that. I don't have time to write anymore." I said, "Okay, do you go on social media? Yes. Do you watch TV? Yes. Do you read books? Yes. Do you read newspapers? Yes." And I was going through all of the things that I felt she could, if she sacrificed those things, she would have writing time. I hear all the time about, women who've just had a baby and they're freaking out. They have 10 minutes here and 15 minutes there. They've been able to write a novel. And I was starting to get really irritated by her, because from what she'd said, I knew her novel was really good and it had lots of promise. And my frustration was I felt like she was hobbling herself from finishing it and using all of these other excuses. What kind of mechanisms do you use to kind of keep going? Because I read, the manuscript for your latest book, and it's incredibly powerful, but also it's a big chunk of work as well. I think having to engage with something that personal, how do you basically keep at it?
It's never about time. That's a barrier we always put up. It's always about truth. It's never about time, because we've got exactly the same time as everybody else has got. and so in the time that I was writing my book, the last Marvel Cinematic Universe film was conceived, written, filmed, edited, and released. So it's not about time, because I could have had time to do that. But I think the thing is, it's seeing things in silos. I have different gears that I'm in, and I'm addicted to multitasking. My multitasking gear, where I'm constantly doing lots, because I feel like I'm busy and I'm getting a load of stuff done. But it's a fallacy, because when I'm multitasking, I've got the same amount of energy as if I sit down and focus. But when I'm multitasking, the energy goes off in lots of different directions, but not very far. When I focus, the energy goes in one direction and it goes a long way. So even if all I do is focus for 6 minutes, I can get a lot done in 6 minutes. If you look at, I was never really into meditation. I was at a conference speaking, and I always stick around afterwards. And there was a thing, it was called, "Do We Really Need to Sit Still?"
Okay.
This little workshop. And I'm like, no, of course we don't. I love it. They're asking the question going, this is ridiculous. So I went along, and actually it was a bad title, because the answer was yes. So it wasn't for radicals like me who said, let's never be quiet, And it was a meditation. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare. She goes, what we're going to do is we're going to sit still for 1 minute. And I'm like, oh my God, I haven't got time for this. It's like, so just sit still, close your eyes. And we sat still for a minute. I opened my eyes a different person.
Really?
I did not believe it had only been a minute. I was like, are you, what? It went like seconds. And she said, no, that's just a minute. I felt different. It was incredible. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if that's what you can do in a minute of time, a total reset, a total reframe, why am I so addicted all the time to multitasking? Because actually, if I collected space rather than more jobs, then in that space, I could have a shift. So I use Pomodoro. I set a timer. I say, right, 7 minutes. We're just going to do this for 7 minutes. Because if you can't find 7 minutes to do something for yourself, that you have got you need to talk to someone. If you haven't got 7 minutes in the day, that's the length of a long poo, for crying out loud. You must be able to find 7 minutes. Do it on the toilet. I mean, I have 3 children. I run a business. I have a husband I like to see now and again. I have a very full life. I can find time. Right. I can find time. And it is about, seeing it in chunks. Like, what can I do right now? What can I do right now? Because on another time chunk, I can order things in a different order. But all I'm doing, vomit copy, getting it down, putting it there. That's all. And what I say to myself is, that's all you need to do. That's your job right now. It's not, done is better than perfect. Just get it down. At another time, another day, we will come back and we will finesse. But right now, splurge. And it gives me freedom. I give myself permission to do that for 7 minutes.
I also see a lot about guilt. Okay. So there's, a school of thought that, to be a good writer, you need to write every day. And I've seen like T-shirts and mugs with "you should be writing" written on them. And I saw in one of your YouTube videos, you talked about using the word "should" and how damaging it can be.
Yeah. Well, first of all, with that thing of like not to be a good writer, you should write. To be a better writer, you need to write more. Like to be a better wrestler, you need to wrestle more. To be a better runner, you need to run more. I want arms like Michelle Obama. I have tried for the past 4 years, sitting on the sofa watching videos of Michelle Obama with my fingers crossed. It doesn't work. Yeah, that's guaranteed evidence and data for you. So there's this thing of the word "should" though is a it steals life from you. So every year at New Year, I make my New Year revolution, as my youngest calls it. And what I do is I give up using certain words. Because I read that in sometime in history that poor people used to sell words to rich people to get money. So they'd sell, so rich people come into market and go, oh, I would like to buy the word whatever, dog or whatever, and then you give them money, and then if anyone hears you saying that word, the rich person can beat you up. So I'm like, one, quite a nice way to make money. Just move to a different part of town and keep saying dog, 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 dog. Second of all, are there any words that I don't want to use anymore? Because if your thoughts become feelings, and your feelings become beliefs, and your beliefs become words, and your words become actions, and that becomes a habit, and that becomes who you are, rather than undoing who I am, let's go back to thoughts. Get rid of the ones I don't want. Feelings, the words. So I landed on words. So I give up words. And one of the first words I gave up was should. Because I would say things like, I should eat better, I should write more, I should stop shouting at my kids when they use the cat as a set of bagpipes. I was, and the should element, that was actually me, not the kids. No, I didn't. I've never used a cat as a set of bagpipes.
It was
and
a
the
dog.
should element, it was the dog, yeah. Blooming Labrador, he doesn't like it. So the should element implies shame. You can't. No one changed because of shame. No one grew from starting from shame. As my nan used to say, you can't grow trees from shame seeds. So the should element is like, yeah, you should, but you're not, and that means you're not good enough, which feeds back into that well-worn path of I'm not good enough. So I swapped the word should for would like to. And every time I came up with should, I would say I would like to eat healthier. Would I like to eat healthier? I mean, I quite like chocolate. I'd like the benefits of eating healthier. I would like to work out more. Oh, gosh, so don't want to work. Well, no, I do. I want to be a person who wants to work out. I would like to stop shouting at my kids. Well, yeah, of course I would. I would like to write. Yes, of course I would. And what I noticed was in the absence of goal setting or committing or making a promise, which I'm also quite big on, the intention is the thing that drove me.
Okay.
And I started eating better, and I started working out, and I started writing, and I stopped shouting at my kids so much because I said I would like to, and we're back to identity. We grow into what we think we can do, what we say we are. And the more times we say we're not, and the more times we tell ourselves we're terrible, we just get further away from it. And the thing about guilt is there's always a choice between guilt and gratitude. When someone else convicts you, if you feel bad about something, if you should be writing and you aren't, the choice is, the 2G choice is, you can choose to feel guilty. That's fine, because victimhood is a nice place to holiday. You can't live there, but it's not. I go on holiday to victimhood. It's lovely, but that all that requires you to do if you want to feel guilty is just wrap yourself in a sleeping bag and slither onto the floor and feel bad. The other G, gratitude, is a different driver. When I see someone in the t-shirt that says you should be writing, I go, hey, thanks for the reminder and the encouragement. Yeah, I would like to write. I'll do some of that at this time on this date. So I'm turning all of that negativity into a catapult to springboard me to doing what I want to do. But should will just keep you in prison. It'll just keep you locked up.
There was something I wanted to come back to that you'd said earlier, and you made the comment about it's not about if you fail, it's about when. So, you've done your thing. You're traditionally published, right? You've put all this time and passion into your work. You've managed to get an agent. You've managed to get a publisher and a publishing deal. You've had your book launch, and then the reviews come in and they're terrible, and your book sales aren't anything like you thought they would be. How can somebody try and navigate through that?
Well, first of all, that's not a full stop. It's not even a semicolon. It's part of the journey. So if you've done all that and got an agent and been published, I mean, it's like when you're driving down the road and all the traffic lights are green. It's rare, but when it happens, you're like, oh yeah, baby, check me out. Not that it's just happened, but we want to feel good about it. We want someone to see it. if you've got that far and your first like negative or failure is no one's buying and selling the book, then the thing isn't, oh my gosh, I'm terrible and it's awful and all this past evidence and data is wrong. The question is, so how do I pivot? Because I feel like there's two things going on at any time. There's evidence and data, and there's your own thoughts and feelings. And evidence and data is the fact that you got published and you did this and this happened, this happened. Your own thoughts and feelings is, I'm not good enough. Now, if we transfer that to a murder, trial, and we say, okay, so we've got CCTV evidence, we've got DNA, we've got the murder weapon, the murderer confessed, I was there, I saw it, that's the evidence and data. But the thoughts and feeling is Maureen from accounting, who says she always thought Bob was dodgy. Which one's going to get us a conviction, do you think, out of those two? Sometimes we ignore the wealth of evidence and data. Now, if all these people have said yes, and then you come to your first failure, that's amazing that's the first time it happened. Usually it happens way before that. But at that point, it's time to pivot. And for me, there are always three things I do, 3 R's of reinvention. I'm always kind of changing up what I've done. And the first one is I take responsibility for what I'm responsible for and nothing else. So I don't worry about what if people don't like it? What if people don't think it's good? Some people will feel that. There's no point in if, it's when. How do I find the ones that do? Where are they? Where are the people who, like me, are going to read this and go, oh, yes, that's my home. This is it. Where are those people? The second thing is I reach out. I don't just sit on my own telling myself I'm awful. I go on a mission of asking questions. So I go to people and go, hey, I know that you're for me. So because I can trust you, you're for me. Can you read this and give me 2 things that you think are even better if, EBI, I call it. What went well, WWW, even better if, EBI. Give me 2 EBIs for every one what went well. Okay. So if you're going to say something went well, that's great, but give me 2 things that I could improve and then go, in your opinion. And I always preface with, from what you think, because people don't want to hurt you.
Yes.
The last R is to reframe. And the reframing this is the essence of resilience. Reframing is the time it takes you from being in a hole to get back out again. Now, for some people, that can be years. It used to be years for me. Then it was months, then it was weeks, then it was days, then it was hours. I can do it in minutes. I'm going for seconds. But it's the time it takes you to get back up and go, right, okay, so that didn't work. So let's take a minute. Let's have a little cry if we need it. Let's breathe. Let's go on pack our suitcase and go and visit victimhood for a few minutes. Let's come back from victimhood. So what does it look like now? What would it look like if I could have more sales? What would I be doing? Well, if I'm a best-selling author in the future and I'm on the New York Times bestseller list, what will I say I did at this moment? And that takes an enormous amount of focus and energy. And if you're spending that focus and energy on investing in I'm terrible, my book's terrible, I'll never be a writer. I think, is it Peter Kay said once when his kid was learning to walk, he said, it's like when a child gets up and takes their first steps and everyone claps and goes, yay, well done. He takes a couple of steps and falls and nobody says, give it up, son, you'll never be a walker. They're like, come on, yeah, you did 2 steps, yeah. But at some point in our life, we start holding ourselves to such a ridiculously high standard that if we did that and you wouldn't do that. The way you talk to yourself, the people who genuinely hate you wouldn't say those things about you. You know, so using a failure as a means to berate yourself, that it is it's like self-harming. It can be an addiction. It can be something that is habitual, and it is something that can change. Habits can change, but I don't know that you do that on your own. I don't know that you do that without other people drawing them in.
Yeah, I mean, I have an example of that. So my first book, 2011, came out. It sold something ridiculous, like 11,000 copies. But I got really lucky. I didn't do any marketing. It was a chance conversation with somebody. The book, they suggested I entered the book into this prize. It was one of 10 books longlisted for the prize. It didn't win, but I got so much, I want to call it column inches. I guess it's screen inches nowadays, but for the book, and it sold amazingly. Okay. The next book, about 4,000. My latest book, which I think is the best book I've ever written, okay, came out last July. The last time I checked, it sold 43 copies. Okay.
So in my head, like I'm a failure. But if I'm really honest, I think I was expecting it all to be word of mouth. The people who did, those 43 people who read it, would go and tell all of their friends. And they didn't. So I was, doing my marketing and stuff on Instagram, and somebody contacted me and they said, look, it's all very nice doing these cute little animations and putting them on your account that like 100 people follow. That's not going to get you anywhere. So, he gave me a bit of a stern talking to.
Yeah.
I was kind of resistant to it, to be fair. And then I went away and I thought about it, and I thought, okay, guy's got a point. So I still wasn't in a position to throw a load of money behind marketing. But what I did do is I went and wrote to 53 different romance bloggers and said, if I send you a copy of my book, will you review it? And most of them came back and said yes. So, it's going to be a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, because they've got backlogs. But at some point, even though that book came out last July, they're going to start writing about it. Mm-hmm. And actually, and I've noticed this, sometimes if I get a bad review, sometimes I'll read a review and it's so awful, I'm like, I'm going to go and take a look at that book because it can't be that bad. And I can't remember the name of it, but somebody wrote a romance novel about the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. And it is literally about a woman who falls in love with the coronavirus and they have a lot of hot sex. And I read the reviews and they are overwhelmingly awful, but I'm going to get it.
It's like, I want to read it. It sounds fabulous.
So,
well,
yeah.
I see what you're saying, and I think my publisher, the criticism that they had of me is, most people write the book and then get, they struggle to do the marketing because it's this whole eternal language. What you've done is you've marketed and you haven't finished writing. And I think marketing in itself is a whole thing. This is like one of my most passionate areas because it's about, there's two ways to market. There's broadcast marketing, which is very 1950s TV advert. We just get in front of people and start shouting about it. And then there's organic relational marketing where you meet people where they are and you don't mention your product until you're a bit way into that relationship. Think of it of going to a club, yeah? You go to a club, you could be the best looking, most attractive guy in the club. But if you come up to me and say, will you marry me? I'd be like, no, you weirdo. I don't know you. Of course I'm going to marry you. But if we have a dance and a drink and we go for a couple of dates and we meet each other's families, and then in a couple of years you say, will you marry me? I'm probably going to say yes. So it's this idea of how do you nurture it? Imagine being down the pub and it's like you're with all your mates and Dave's talking about the fact that he's thinking about getting married and he's thinking about kind of asking his boyfriend to marry him and Sue is talking about the baby she's just had and Samir's going on about his shop that he wants to open and you go, oh, I've written a book, and everyone goes, wow, no way, Stu, that's so cool. Then you go next week for drinks and people are talking about different things and the marriage has moved on a bit and the shop, and you go, I've written a book. And we're like, yeah, great, yeah, how's it going? And then the next week, it's like Samir's had this problem somewhere else and he's talking about that and somebody's won the lottery and so on, and you go, I've written, and they're like, oh, for goodness sake, because all you're doing is turning up. Even if you're doing it with little animations and stuff, you're just saying the same thing again and again. And more or less, people are just like, I don't think Stu's got anything else going on. I don't think he's not interested in what we're doing. He's not talking about anything but what he's just done. And that's your group. Whereas out there are people that know nothing about it and might be interested. So the whole thing about organic relational marketing for me is if I'd written a fiction, especially if I was writing to your caliber, the whole world would know. I would not have a problem if I could write like that. But the thing is to say what I do, I would use not trying to magnify that book, but doing what you're doing, talking about, hey, do you have all these issues with being a writer? Do you have these problems? Do you think there's a book in you? I felt that too. So you're actually doing the hero's journey for people. So you're saying, do you have all this? You're worried about this. I felt that too. So you're establishing yourself as the guide, not the hero. What I did was this, and here's where I failed. Now you're putting a plan together for them. But actually, it came good, and I've published this book. And if this is something that you would like to do as well, here's my list of 10 things that you should do if you want to write, but you think you're not a writer. Click here to download it. So they click, they put their email address in, they download, they're like, oh my gosh, how good is this guy? He's given me, this is for strangers, obviously not friends. He's given me this amazing thing. So you download it. Then that triggers a series of emails which say, hey, here's step one. Here's some more info about that. Here's some more info. By the fourth email, you're like, do you know what? My book is out. And all of these things that I've been telling you, I've put into practice for this book. If you want to read it, you can order it here. And then you do another 4 emails and then another. So what you're doing is you're giving, meeting people where they are, giving, and then inviting them and giving them invitation. That's one way, as opposed to just telling the same friends about it all the time. There's something around marketing that is a whole, it's a bit like fashion. People think if they go down Primark and buy a pair of leggings that suddenly they could hit the Paris catwalks. No, it's not. That's not how it works. There's so much more to it. And marketing is the same thing. It's not, marketing isn't repeatedly telling your mates or even buying Facebook ads. Marketing is about meeting people where they are and being Marmite or some other well-known yeast extract, because although yeast extracts are available, but you literally want to turn people off because they're not your people. Like for every person that says to me, I hate what you've written or I hate your talk, I'm like, thank you so much. Because I don't want to work with you, do I? I don't want to, because you'll be miserable and I'll be miserable. So let's not do it. In fact, some of my marketing for the stuff I write is, if you don't download this if you're not brave enough, you're not at this stage, blah, blah, because you will be miserable and you will hate it. Don't join my mentor group because it will be awful for you. And I'm cool with that. I want to be Marmite. So what we're trying to do is filter the people who will sing, and also ask them to. Like, ask them, would you, like what you did, writing to them saying, would you review this book? Fantastic. Now, in the meantime, because don't forget they're getting books every day, what I would do is, I don't know, get some chewing gum and make a new wrapper that says, Stu's new book, chew it over, and send that to them. Or you just do something that meets them where they are. Do something that adds value, brings joy, adds a smile. Stop thinking that you in your room is the entire world. You in your computer in your room is all of your world, but only one part of other people's. So go beyond the fear and connect. Because that is what makes people invest their time of reading, their energy, not just their money, when they feel invested in,
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because I think, certainly for a writer like me, because I do self-publish, by the time, okay, right, so my book came out in July. I'd spent 4 years on and off. The last month I was doing 16-hour days to get it ready for the end of July. Got to the end of July and was like, I have to get it out. And it might be like, I don't know, it might be how mums feel like when they're pregnant. I've spent 9 months doing this, enough, okay? I just wanted to get it out. What I didn't want to do is stand back and think, okay, right, so it'll come out in 2 months, and this is my marketing plan.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I guess some of it is about, reining yourself back in and trying to think a little bit more like a business person.
Not so much a business, a relational connecting person, because the thing is, you've done the whole thing that I did, having Trinity. You did all this prep to, I just want to get it out. You gave no thought to what the baby's going to wear or ride in or drink once it was here. It's like this. It's not a surprise that you're going to have a book. It's not a surprise. You've been working to it for 4 years. When it comes, it's not. I think people have this thing where they say, I'm not a marketer, or I don't want to do sales and sound sleazy. Yeah. But it's not sales. It's an invitation for people to have some magic in their lives. It's not a sale. It's like and also if you think you've got any control over what people do with their money, I'll choose what I spend my money on. But on your book, I follow you on social media. We're friends. When your first book came out, and you said, but you sent me a message saying, my book is out, will you read it and buy it? And I went, yeah. And I did it. You didn't ask me this time. I didn't know that book was there. I had to go looking for that. And I am your friend, for crying out loud. Do you see what I mean? So you're whatever prep you do for marketing is not good. I'm telling you that. So because I'm literally queuing at the door with my money in my hand, waiting, and I didn't get what I didn't know. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's not about saying I've got to do this big launch plan. And actually, I've got it's not even a plan. It's just this 20 days before I want to open my cart for this course or for this book. This is what I say on social media. This is what I do. And it's not buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. It's little things that I put in. Sometimes I put a thing up saying, something exciting is coming soon. I want to tell you about it, but I've promised myself until I get to this point, I won't, but stay tuned. Right. Just something as little as that. The people who are already excited by my previous work go, oh, like meerkats popping up. What is it? What is it? You don't need to tell them anymore. And then a couple of days later, so I've actually got a plan. I'll send it to you. And what you perhaps look at it and adapt it for what it would look like for writers. But it's all about engagement. It's not about selling. Marketing is about engagement. It's about coming alongside. Some people in their marketing do things to others. They say, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. Some people do things for others, where they say, okay, I've written this for you because I think this will be good for you. Now, the really successful people do things with others. There is a withness. So in the run up to that story coming out, they're saying, I know what it feels like to feel like this. That's why I wrote this book. Okay. You are someone who feels you've got more potential than you are unleashed. You are someone who started doing a job and now it's got you. You speak into people's pain and you go, that's Mark in my book. That's why I'm so pleased that I wrote this book, because Mark is literally an embodiment of all that way of feeling. I'm reading it going, who is Mark? I am Mark. Where is the book? Just so by the time you drop it and go, hey, if anyone wants to read my book, people are already ready. Yeah. People already want that.
Do you know? See, I think self-promotion as a British person, okay, is quite frowned upon. I think British people don't like that. And I think what you've just said is there's a way of doing it without being kind of totally obvious. I'm not saying it's stealthy or dishonest, like to market that way, but I think it has changed. And you were saying in the 50s, it's like Klaxons, by Tide or whatever. And I think people are looking for that. I don't want to say the tribe, but
look, especially after pandemic, right? Post-pandemic way of being, because I agree with you about the whole British thing. That is a really, that's part of it. That is part of it. But this is the problem with people in general, and British people in particular, being British, I'm speaking about myself here, that we want things to be better, but we're scared of change. And that's the crux. We want things to improve, but we're terrified of things being different. Now, post-pandemic, where there's been a cultural earthquake, right? It's like in an earthquake, the land, like my nan used to have a friend called Ethel who lived in London during the Blitz. And she talked about coming out from a tube station and going home, but being really disorientated because streets had been leveled. So like you can have a map to get you around, but after an earthquake, a map is useless. What you need is a compass. A compass will show you where your true north is. And we are coming out of a season of everyone being different. Like I've had 3 kids. Every maternity leave, I have to reinvent my identity and find a new way of belonging. We've all done that. We've all had extended paternity leave, and not many of us actually got a baby at the end of it. We just got, we came out and went, what was that for?
Results.
So a lot of us have gone through loss. A lot of us have had to navigate real pain and trauma. But what we do get to do is we get to choose how we frame that story and what we write about that. I keep talking about how we've all become Generation C, and the C doesn't stand for COVID. It stands for courage, creativity, and change. So for me, I feel like the value of our system, what we value, has been upturned. And from now on, post-pandemic, a way of being for post-pandemic isn't, you're valuable if you do this and you're certain and you lead in this old way and you just say, this is what I do. And you actually being able to get alongside people, do belonging, meet people where they are. That is going to be a critical skill, and the agile will inherit the earth. And the people who can't do that, who previously might have been successful in business or whatever, will find themselves stuck. Because if you can't, it's no longer enough. If you look at this, the sort of economics of our society, there's a company in America called Tom's Shoes. And every time you buy a pair of shoes, they give a pair of shoes to someone who hasn't got shoes. Okay. Companies more and more now are doing something where they're in alignment. Like I'm governor at a school, and I was working with the school. They wanted to set up a breakfast club and they didn't have any money. And I'm like, so go approach all the businesses, get a calendar up on your website, go to the local businesses and say, just checking who doesn't want to be on the calendar of being the business that pays for toast that day for our children who are aged 5 to 7. Who doesn't want to be on that calendar? Did they have more people than them? Yes, they did. Because paying for toast for a group of kids isn't a lot of money. And you do not want to be the business who isn't on that. So there's something at the minute where businesses actually have things, what's it called? A corporate social responsibility, yes. CSR. But they have people responsible for how do we do alongsideness. So actually, what we're moving towards is a place where you can't indulge in imposter syndrome when people and businesses and other people are looking for connectivity, because it is actually turning on its head. It's you being selfish rather than sharing what you have with the people that really want it and need it. And I don't want to think it's like I'm talking about. I think some people say, yeah, but how is a fiction book going to change people's lives? Are you kidding me? Are you mad? Of course it does. Of course it does, because that magic that way of living a story without living it is literally what changes things. I read The Turbulent Turn of Tyke Tyler by Jean Kemp when I was maybe 10 years old. That book changed I've still got the actual copy I read.
Really?
That book changed my life. That was a kid's book. It was I always want people to read it, so I don't want to spoil
What's it called again?
But it's The Turbulent Turn of Tyke Tyler.
Okay.
It is it's a book that I read at 10. I've read it a lot since. I read it to my children when they were 7, 8, 9, 10. I read it sometimes because it's like a day and a half read for me. I just read it through. Books, I tell my kids, I've always told my kids about the storybooks we have. Books are your friends, only they will never let you down. And my children are readers, are story devourers, because it gives them a space to make sense of the world in a way that you can't do outside of a story. So the new world, the post-pandemic world, the only people that I'm gonna have empathy for, but I'm gonna be disappointed in, are the people that say during the pandemic, I did a lot of Zooms in my pants, drank gin every day at 2:00, and I just sat waiting for things to go back to normal. I mean, we're not going back to normal. We're going forward to something new and different. And if you don't seize the opportunity, if you don't navigate that, if you don't just get curious about how that could look in your mindset, in your way of being around writing, around creating, around serving, around gifting, and you insist on sticking with that, I'm not good enough and I don't want to upset anyone by saying, would you like to join my world? Before that might have washed, but it just feels like you're on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
If we go 40 years in the future and look back and say, I had this gift and I kept it to myself at a time when people were suffering, I don't know how you're going to level with that. So for me, I'm always wanting to be authentic and vulnerable. That's my commitment. I'm very clear on what my values are. I know that there are people that will value what I do and it will work, and other people won't, and that's fine. It doesn't stop. It's gotten better. You need to get lots of no's and lots of negativity for it to not stop you. Still, but the first time someone said they didn't like what I'd done, I stopped. I'd done a talk. It was one person out of 200, and I cancelled all my talks for the next 2 weeks.
Really?
Cancelled all my keynotes. Yeah, I sat at home and cried and thought I'm terrible. And I look at it now and think that one guy who was sat on the front row and was his physicality was very angry, and he'd said a comment like, I'm not here to love children, I'm not even here to like them, I'm here to teach. And everyone behind him had like hackled. So even though he's diametrically opposed to what I think and feel, what I say and do, he's not my people, he's not the intended audience, he's not who it's for. I let him live rent-free in my head for 2 weeks and stop me from connecting with people who I could have helped level up.
But I was,
and I don't want that.
Yeah, a writer said something really interesting to me. We were talking about themes and stuff in books, and I guess this ties into a lot of the core values that you have in the talks that you do. And she was saying, I was talking about bad reviews and stuff, and she just kind of shrugged and she said, "Well, they weren't ready to receive it."
It's not the time.
What was that?
Although I want to be honest about it, that when I started writing my book, it was the publisher said you can write what you like, which was too much freedom for me. So I started writing. It very quickly turned into a kind of more of an autobiography and a big story. And actually, for lots of different reasons, that's not the book I want to give them. And I contacted them and said, what I want to do is, I wasn't ready at the time. I wasn't ready. What I want to do is I want to write a book that is for educators and influencers in children's lives. And it's got things like the power of language, the power of belonging, the power of identity. And I want to vibe on those things. Now, what I was doing before was just talking about how good it is when people do this. But also in my experience, I want to make people aware of the cost when they don't. But I wasn't brave enough to talk about the negativity. I only wanted to be positive. But in my experience, in my story, I had 100 teachers between nursery and university, and 5 of them were everyday heroes. So I lent into the 5, but 95 weren't. And of those 95, some of them made it worse. And so it's gotten to the point now where I feel comfortable, brave enough to write a book, the book I wanted to write, which has this is great and this is what happened and this is good and this is what didn't help. And now you choose. And that's quite, because I just want to be liked. I just want to fit in. I want everyone to say you're lovely, and I don't want anyone to say anything horrible to me ever. But back in the real world, but I also want to have an impact, and that means that. So, and I know that there'll be some people that say, well, that's not true. I don't know that there are, because the more that I've shown up, the more that I've been honest, the more that I've done what I described, met people where they are. People just look, when I produce something, people buy it. They just love it. Not because I've said buy it, but because I've become someone they like, they know, they trust, that I've become a friend.
That's powerful stuff.
Mm.
So, what final kind of piece of advice would you give for, any writer who's feeling kind of discouraged?
Part of the journey, part of the story you get to tell is how you pushed through and how you overcame. And every film that we go see is written to the hero's journey. It has a character that struggles, meets someone else who's a guide, gives them a way of succeeding. They try, fail, have a breakthrough, and everything works out great in the end. It's everywhere. If we went to see a movie, if we went to see that Taken with Liam Neeson, all the tension in that movie. If we went to see the movie and in the first bit they said, we've got your daughter, and he said, oh, okay, it's fine, don't worry about it, I'll have another daughter. No one's going to see that film. Or if he said, I will hunt you down and get you, and then everything he did worked, he just went down, he phoned up and said, has anyone seen any kidnappers? And they went, yeah, they went in there. And he went, right. And then he went in and he was really strong and he was really confident and he just got his daughter back. No one would go. They'd all be going, that's a rubbish film. we want to see struggle. We want to see overcoming.
I think I want to rewrite that speech he says to, I will write you, I will edit you.
Do it.
And I will publish you.
And I will publish you. Yes, do it. That is the writer's answer phone message. You should record it and then send it out as one of your little freebies that you're going to do to bring people alongside with you for when you publish your next book. If you're a struggling writer, here's something for you to put on your answer phone. It's true. And I think it's that thing of, I sat in a conference once and there was some guy on the stage talking about having a Fortune 500 company and how much he gives to charity, and he turns over bazillions of pounds, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I started playing with my phone, and then the next couple got up and they talked about, they set up this business from their garage and now it was really big, and I'm like, yada yada yada. And he said, and it was really hard because in the first year we drank away all of the profits, and in the second year we drank away everyone's wages. And I was like, oh my God, tell me more. You have been an alcoholic. And said, how have you overcome? What did you do? I would invest in whatever that guy was selling over the other successful guy. Because who do I identify with? I identify with the person who's gone through struggle. Now, the thing about being brave and resilient is it sucks while you're doing it. So don't expect to be pushing through and feeling great about yourself. It's the story you tell afterwards that is a great story. So I embrace not feeling good enough, embrace the struggle, embrace wanting to give up, note it down and go, that's another one for the autobiography. That's what's going to make your autobiography a bestseller. Not I wrote and everyone bought it and then I was famous. Well, I don't want to see that film. I'm not bothered. So embrace it. Start thinking about future you rather than present you, because future you will look back and go, I was on the floor and I reframed. And that is a powerful story.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Jazz. It's been a fantastic.
Oh, it's so good.
It's been great to talk to you.
So good.
I know we've covered a lot of stuff and we've been digging around, but yeah, certainly I feel much better after this conversation, and I hope those who are writing and listening will, feel the same thing. But I do want to talk to you about kind of where people can find you online.
Yeah, well, the gift of reality TV is you can type my name into Google and you will find me. But I'm on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on LinkedIn as well. And my website is just my name. So it's jazzampaw-Farr.com, which I'm sure you'll have in the show notes. But yeah, I answer everybody who gets in touch. So if anybody, like has a thought or feeling, and I encourage people to think, what is it you're going to do more of or less of having heard this? Like, don't be inspired, because inspire is a verb. Do something, don't be inspired. But anyone who gets in touch, I always try and reach out and answer. So just want to encourage you to keep going.
Fantastic. So I'll put all of the links to your socials, your TED Talk, your website. I'll put all of those in the production notes, or if you're looking on YouTube, I'll put those in the supplementary information down below. But yes, thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's my pleasure. And please record that writer's version of Liam Neeson's answer phone message so I can have it on my mobile.
Will do. You've got a deal. All right. Thanks again. Take care.
My pleasure.